I wish I could hear their voice again. Hopefully those words will make a bit more sense by the end of my talk. And don't worry, I won't ask any of you to raise your hands, but has anyone here been in a situation in which there's the voice of a particular person that they wish they could hear again? I'd like you to spend some time thinking about that person whilst I talk. For the past 4 years, I've been developing a project for use in hospices known as From My Perspective. I'm a creative arts student whose background is mainly in music and sound design. And to be honest with you, before starting this work, I didn't even know what a hospice was. So, for those of you that may be in a similar position here today, a hospice is a place for those coming towards the end of their life that require specialist palliative care needs. To provide some context about this project, I wanted to first share with you the inspiration behind it, which came back in 2018 when my terminal grandfather was living with us. He was the kind of character who always had a story to tell for anyone with an open ear. So, one day I sat down with him and recorded our conversation, which a man of his disposition, as I'm sure you can imagine, was obviously delighted with. You could record him each and every day and there'd be a new story. Stories about his childhood, his upbringing, stories about various hijinks and skipping school. Once our conversation finished, I then took these recordings of my grandfather and combined his voice with music and sound related to what he was talking about. I then placed this into a small wooden box, personalized with my grandfather's name, which was capable of playing back the experience via a speaker. I called it the Memory Box, and it's on stage with me here today. When he unfortunately passed, I decided to give this Memory Box as a gift to my mum for her birthday. She had no idea that I'd done any of this, and whenever she opened it up, she held the Memory Box within her hand and stared at it for a while without saying much else. Her reaction to this was a massive indication to me about the potential that this project could have for people in a similar situation. I'd like to play you this extract taken directly from my grandfather's listening experience. It includes audio of him talking about how he learned how to cook from his mother, in addition to some music and sound. I don't think I mentioned it before, but his name was William Crockard, although he often went by Billy.
You know, when Mum used to bake whenever I was young, and then when she trimmed the what I call it, the dough off the apple thing, I used to get it and roll it up and put it on a saucer and spread it out in a saucer just the way she done the plate. And then there was a few, say it was apples, a few spoonfuls of apples on it, and then another one on the top, and pushed it in and pressed this here. She let me do that, and I put it in with the other ones. And then see when it come out, you want to see it, it's just as good as the other ones. You know what I mean? It's just by watching her and doing things like that.
Following this important realization about the potential of this project, I wanted to develop the idea further. So, last summer, I conducted a study alongside the Marie Curie Hospice in order to test the feasibility of From My Perspective. To give you a brief overview, much like the inspiration, this work involved me conducting life story interviews with people coming towards the end of their life. Now, I wanted to make sure that during this I had enough time to develop these experiences and allow each person to have a listen to them. But as you can imagine, given the nature of palliative care, conditions can change quite quickly, and this was not always the case. You might be thinking, well, what kind of questions did I ask them? People were prompted with questions about the key themes and transitions that were important to them in their lives. This included questions about their childhood, their upbringing, their family life, hobbies, relationships, work life, and so on. The style of interview questioning really depended on what the person's individual desire and outcome was for this experience. For example, most people wanted to use this project as an opportunity to leave behind a recorded message or legacy for their family to listen to once they were gone. I only had one interview session with these people, so you can imagine that it's quite difficult to gain an entire life history about a person within such a short space of time. But what I was able to do was capture their voice, stories, and memories from their perspective. It's the seemingly everyday aspects of life which are important to each and every one of us. Once I finished these interviews, much like my grandfather's, I then had to develop music and sound for each person's experience. This consisted of audio effects, soundscapes, and music that related to what each person was talking about. I refer to this as storytelling sound design, as I'm using sound both in the sense of the person's spoken word and also sound materials that derive directly from their narrative. To further provide you with an example of this type of storytelling sound design, I'm going to try and paint a scenario in your heads. So, I'd like everyone to close their eyes, please, until I say so. And yes, I'll be checking to make sure that you are, okay? So, imagine you're sitting in a forest with your friends, cooking by the fire. How does it feel? What kind of sounds come to mind? Okay, you can now open your eyes. Hopefully we can all agree that once these sound design elements are combined together, it starts to create a more visual image within each of our heads that situates us within that place. I had to listen attentively to each person's interview to ensure that I was developing sound that accurately portrayed their voice, stories, and memories. Once finished, I then placed each person's listening experience inside a personalized memory box that was presented to them alongside their family. I forgot to mention, but the reason for developing this memory box was because I wanted to provide people with something of value, something tangible as opposed to the likes of a CD or a USB, which are so often disposable. It was important to me that the memory box had the sole purpose of playing back a person's experience and nothing else. The image of my mum holding the memory box within her hands all those years ago still stands out to me. One of the main strengths of a project like this, as I'm sure you can imagine, is the element of a person's voice within each of the experiences. As a result of this project, I was able to capture inflections, accent, and manners of speech, which are so powerful in terms of representing a sense of self. When I asked you at the start of this talk to think about a person's voice that you wish you could hear again, I'm sure you can think of all the various inflections, accent, and manners of speech that made that person's voice unique to them. Throughout my time interviewing these people, I was very fortunate to be able to obtain a brief glimpse into their lives. There was one person who shared with me a touching story about how he used to take his kids to the forest whenever they were younger. For this person in particular, they recognized the importance of a project like this and wanted specifically to document these aspects and stories of his life so that his family would be able to listen to them once he was gone. And sadly, as I mentioned before, given the nature of palliative care, conditions can change quite quickly, and several weeks after this interview, the person did in fact pass away. His family have very graciously allowed me to play this extract for you all here today.
Sundays was always out, was always in the car, let's go. Whether it was picnics, whether it was historical houses, every Sunday was religious, get out in the car, hail, rain or snow, it was out, you know. And then we were lucky and we had woods at the back of the back garden. So I had made them, they wouldn't have a den between them, they had to have a den each. So we still talk about that to this day. We get bacon and sausages and beans on a Sunday morning, and we go up into the woods and make a fire and cook. Yeah. Yeah, still talk about that to this day. Yeah. Sorry.
Now, you might be thinking why this work is important. I'm very fortunate to have two parents that recognize the importance of archiving and documenting aspects of both my brother and I's life from such a young age. I promise I didn't just include this clip of myself to show off my blonde locks, which were fabulous at the time, I must say, but more so represent how quickly these moments can pass us by. Again, at the start of this talk, I asked you to think about a person's voice that you wish you could hear again. In my attempts to share this project with other people, without fail, I hear the same words over and over. I wish I could hear their voice again. One of the most heartbreaking comments I received from a lady last month when I told her about this project was that she said to me she had forgotten what her husband sounds like. Other people have asked me to make a memory box for them, and the only audio material they had for me to work with was either an old answering phone message or an accidental video that briefly featured the person's voice in it. It amazes me that despite how small or short these extracts are, people still cherish them. If we reach into our pockets, I would say that the vast majority of us have some type of phone which is more than capable of recording and capturing these types of voices, memories, and stories that are unique to ourselves, something that we don't often realize the importance of until it's too late. I recognized this importance when interviewing my grandfather all those years ago. I knew that this was something that I'd be able to give back to my mum as a gift, so that she could listen to his voice whenever she wanted to, or more so needed to. I'm hoping that my talk here today can act as an encouragement for you all to take the opportunity to sit down with someone you know, get out your phone, press record, and listen to their story. And whilst you're doing that, you might also think about a memory or story that you also want to leave behind. Now, everyone loves a talk that ends with a quotation, no sarcasm intended. But I felt like these words from Margaret J. Wheatley are very poignant. Listening is such a simple act. It requires us to be present, and that takes practice. But we don't have to do anything else. We don't have to advise, coach, or sound wise. We just have to be willing to sit there and listen. If we can do that, we create moments in which real healing is available. And just to finish off from me, in the spirit of today's talk, I think it's very appropriate to thank you all for listening. Thank you very much.